At the block stage. Again, my name is Hayate from Cointelegraph Japan, and I'm very happy to introduce everybody here. We're having a lot of panels about Metaverse and Web3. And I'm very happy to introduce Diederik from Chainalysis to introduce us about the pitfalls that may happen in Web3. Without further ado, Diederik, please come on stage.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Thanks to all of you for joining us for this session today. And thank you for once again welcoming me into the beautiful city of Dubai. It is really quite fitting that we at Chainalysis are presenting in the MENA region today, as we just released a report citing the MENA region as the #1 region for crypto adoption in the entire world in terms of year-on-year growth, with a 48% year-on-year growth. By way of background, my name is Diederik van Wersch, and I joined Chainalysis 4.5 years ago in a much less developed and much more premature cryptocurrency space. Now, is it going through? Now, when I joined, I already could see the seeds being sown for the MENA region and the UAE specifically to become one of the foremost cryptocurrency hubs in the world. Already, a lot of the great pioneers, visionaries, entrepreneurs in this space were flocking over here because they foresaw the potential that the MENA region has. And fast forward 4.5 years later, and look at all of us here, it's safe to say that this will be one of the most important regions for Web3 development. And developed this region has, and that's evident by the fact that we're even having this discussion today at all. Just a few years ago, terms like Web3, cryptocurrency, blockchain, these were uttered only by esoteric enthusiasts who were very intimately familiar with the technology. But now it seems like you can't even escape discussions about Web3. It's on the front page of every financial newspaper. It's being spoken about by major celebrities and businessmen. And traditional businesses that for years eschewed the Web3 space are now entering into it en masse. Now, to get a sense of how mainstream Web3 really is, I want to get a sense of what the Web3 adoption is here in the audience today. So I'm going to try to pick the energy levels up a little bit. I want a bit of audience interaction. So audience, I would like you to raise your hand if you have ever bought Bitcoin. All right, that's a few of us, great. I would like you to raise your hand if you've ever bought ETH. That might be even more. Okay, that's an interesting development. I would like you to raise your hand if you've ever bought an NFT. I would like you to raise your hand if you've ever interacted with a DeFi protocol. And I would like you to raise your hand if you've ever been rug pulled. All right, good. Oh, and raise your hand if you're currently scared to look at your crypto portfolio. All right, I'm here because they promised me free food. But anyway, if you didn't raise your hand to any of those questions, don't worry about it. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about what Web3 is. What is the promise that Web3 hopes to bring? And what are the major dangers you need to be concerned about? What are the risks that exist in the Web3 space? And for that portion, my dear colleague Shai will come on afterwards and show you how we can mitigate these threats in Web3 and what it is that Chainalysis can do to assist businesses that are looking to enter into this space. But before I get into that, I should probably let you know why we at Chainalysis are qualified to speak about Web3 at all. At Chainalysis, we're unique because we work with all the players in the Web3 ecosystem. So you see there that I cite 850 customers. I don't just put that up as a vanity metric, okay? We work with customers in all the aspects of Web3. We work with the law enforcement agencies, helping to investigate crimes in Web3. We work with the cryptocurrency and Web3 businesses, ensuring they remain compliant with the regulations. And we work with the traditional financial institutions that are entering this space en masse to make sure that they can deal with cryptocurrency confidently. We are the foremost blockchain data provider. We know what's going on in the blockchain. We know which addresses belong to large exchange like Coinbase and Binance, which addresses belong to protocols like Aave and Uniswap, and also which addresses belong to darknet marketplaces, which addresses belong to terrorism financing and sanctions and hacks. So nobody knows more about what goes on in the blockchain than we do, both the good and the bad. But the majority of it really is good and exciting and innovative and revolutionary. And that brings us to the very concept of Web3 itself. You see, when I sat down to write down what Web3 is, I got a bit of a case of writer's block. You think it would be an easy term to define, but as it is with most new terms, there isn't one set definition, and it's open to interpretation. So I figured, okay, well maybe the best way to do this would be to reverse engineer. And I decided, rather than come up with my own definition of Web3, what about if I think about what words come to mind when I hear the term Web3? And maybe again, much like the blockchain itself, we can decentralize our knowledge base, and I might ask you, audience, for a bit of participation. When I say Web3, how about you shout out some words that come to mind? What do you think of? Web3. Don't be shy, we're all friends. What was that? Metaverse, I like that one. So what was that? Ownership, that's a very good one. Sorry? DeFi. All right, okay, so we got a few different ones up there. It's a little hard to hear over here, a lot of people talking. But this is what I came up with. Decentralization, blockchain, user ownership, like the gentleman there said, peer-to-peer, censorship resistance, power to the people, token-based, democracy. And here's what I realized when I came up with all of this. These are the terms that relate to the underlying philosophy that drove Satoshi, him or herself, to write the initial Bitcoin blockchain white paper all those years ago. And what Web3 is really about, Web3 is about taking the underlying principles and philosophy that have driven the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin space forward this past 12 years and applying it to the internet at large. Let me explain what I mean by that. So, for decades, centuries prior to Satoshi, and Satoshi being the person that created Bitcoin, it was taken for granted that the money supply, the financial system, would operate in a centralized manner. There would be a centralized entity, in this case, let's say central banks or the governments, that would produce the money. There would be centralized entities that would hold the money on behalf of the citizens, banks. There would be centralized entities that would be responsible for payments. And if a government, if a bank, if a centralized entity deemed an individual to be undesirable for whatever reason, they would be blocked out of the financial system. What Satoshi said is, it doesn't have to be this way. What if we have a decentralized mechanism in which the money supply can be created, where we have a predictable method in how much currency is created in each period? What if we have a decentralized mechanism in which users can interact with each other in a peer-to-peer fashion, and users could be their own bank? I like what the gentleman there said about ownership. That's what it's really about. Because yes, you might think that you own the money in the bank, and in a sense you do, but the bank really is responsible for it. They can block you out of it. With Bitcoin, if I have my own private keys, nobody can block me from making a transaction. Nobody can block me from participating. And what Web3 is about is taking those principles and applying it to the internet at large. So the Chainalysis definition of Web3 is that it's a redesign of the internet that we've come to know as being governed by centralized parties, being replaced with a decentralized network of services that individuals control. So what does this mean in practice? Let's look at lending. So traditionally, with lending, if I want to apply for a loan, well, I need to get a mortgage broker involved, I might need to get a bank involved, maybe a lawyer as well. With decentralized lending, I simply interact with a protocol and I'm able to put some funds up as collateral, receive some funds in return, and in the protocol, the code itself acts as law. There's no middleman or third party involved. With investing, we now have an interesting case where crypto is changing the way that or Web3 is changing the way we understand crypto. So traditionally, if I want to buy cryptocurrency, I've needed to go on a centralized exchange, like Coinbase, Binance, and there's nothing wrong with that in practice. But this takes this underlying principle of decentralization and applies it now to the way that we even buy crypto. So I can interact with a decentralized exchange, send them one currency, and then receive another currency in return, again, with no middleman, with no third parties involved. And our own Chainalysis data tells us on-chain, there's more transactions going to decentralized platforms now than to centralized ones. And these both fall into the broad category of decentralized finance, which is probably the biggest Web3 use case at the moment. But a lot of people don't care that much about finance. They don't spend their days thinking about inflation and the money supply and transactions. They might have different interests. Imagine I'm an artist. I like making paintings. I've not cared one bit about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. But suddenly, well, maybe NFTs are interesting for me. I now have a verifiable method of proving that I own a piece of art that is visible for the world to see. If I want to transact that art, I can do that on a public blockchain. I can even earn royalties every single time someone wants to use my art. Now Web3 has opened itself up to an entirely new audience. I said at the beginning how Web3 has gone mainstream. what could be more mainstream than Cristiano Ronaldo, the most famous man in the world, partnering with Binance to launch his own line of NFTs? This now opens up the Web3 space to an entirely new audience, and it seems like it's going to continue to grow. And we can see this by the fact that Bitcoin is not the only game in town anymore. Yes, Bitcoin is fantastic for certain use cases, but not a lot can be built on top of Bitcoin. You can't have NFTs on Bitcoin. You can't build a decentralized exchange on Bitcoin. So what we're seeing is that there are other blockchains now catching up to its dominance, with Ethereum being the most prominent. Now with Ethereum, there was just the merge, a recent event that some people believe in the future will result in Ethereum flipping Bitcoin, because you can build a lot more on Ethereum than you can on something like Bitcoin. But there are a lot of competitors to that crown. And I was even watching a documentary on the way here called, I think it's called Cryptopians, it's on Netflix. And there was a gentleman there, an economic historian. He was talking about how when automobiles were first created, there were hundreds of different businesses trying to create and sell the first cars. After a few years, there was a shakedown. We're talking about just 20 businesses. A few years after that, you're talking about five or six. So I imagine we're going to see a big shakeup in terms of the number of blockchains and Web3 businesses. We've seen that already with businesses like Luna collapsing, and it's an unfortunate but inevitable part of the ecosystem, and it actually shows that the ecosystem is trending in the right direction. And what we can see in terms of the direction that Web3 is taking is that DeFi, decentralized finance, is exploding. This is Chainalysis' own data. I want you to take a look at this. In Q2 of 2020, we were looking, and the orange line here represents number of transactions, at, I don't know, like 180 million transactions, but virtually $0 value involved. Okay, it was practically worthless DeFi. Now, fast forward 1 year later to 2021 Q2, we're not just seeing $400 million worth of transactions, but we are seeing $4 trillion worth of transactions being sent and received. I'm not an economic historian myself, but I have to believe an increase of that nature is relatively unprecedented. And here's what's also interesting. Yes, there was a minor dip in terms of the number of transactions, but it still remains very high. So what it goes to show is that yes, the overall dollar amount has taken a drop as the values of the coins has dropped in this bear market we're in, but there are still plenty of good users in the DeFi space. But therein lies part of the issue, because of course it's not just good users that exist in the space. Like with all new industries and like with all technologies, there are always going to be negative, nefarious actors that try and take advantage of it. And that's where we get into the subject of Web3 and crime. Now, before I discuss crime at all, I want to let you guys know something. This is a very famous Chainalysis statistic. Despite all the talk there is about how Web3, cryptocurrency, blockchain, it's used by criminals and terrorists and money launderers, our own data tells us that on the blockchain, just 0.15% of all transactions were related to illicit activity. 0.15%. So what this means is that the vast majority of actors in the cryptocurrency space are completely legitimate. And all the detractors that seem to think that cryptocurrency is just used for crime are wildly mistaken. By way of comparison, the UN estimates that in the traditional fiat space, we're looking at 3 to 5% of all transactions with the global GDP being involved with money laundering. So not only is it less in crypto, we can be much more granular. The UN can only give us an estimate. With crypto, because every transaction is public, because everything is listed on a global ledger which everybody in the world can see, it's probably the worst possible way to launder money. Imagine I rob a bank and anybody can look up where I am on Google Maps afterwards. That's effectively what we're dealing with in crypto. So I would actually argue not only is cryptocurrency not a haven for money launderers, there is nowhere that criminals are less safe than on the blockchain. But that doesn't mean that they aren't going to try. And that leads us to our first subject of Web3 crime, which is money laundering. So picture this. I'm on the darknet. I'm selling all sorts of nefarious goods, cocaine, weapons, what have you. And I'm accepting my money in crypto. So I'm sitting on all this pretty crypto, but it's dirty. What am I going to do with it? I need to launder it so I can get it on an exchange so I can go buy myself nice things. So what do? Well, recently, what they've been doing is they've been sending their funds to DeFi protocols. So if you look right here, in red, in 2019, we see that criminals that were trying to launder their funds were predominantly sending it to centralized exchanges. Those are the big exchanges you all know and have likely used. Fast forward to 2022, we are looking at nearly 75% of all criminal funds being sent to DeFi protocols. Why is that? Well, that's probably because DeFi protocols don't have the same know your customer checks that a centralized exchange would. It feels easier to launder money on them. On top of that, they have a high amount of liquidity. There's a lot of different coins they can use. And these criminals feel, well, these Web3 businesses, they don't have the appropriate anti-money laundering solutions in space, and it's far more difficult to investigate Web3 crimes. They're wrong to think that, but that's how they're thinking right now. But what this does also point is to a higher level of sophistication among the criminals. DeFi protocols take a certain level of Web3 know-how to operate on. These criminals are getting a little bit smarter. There are less of them, but they're more good now, as there's almost been a shakedown of the criminal ecosystem, as let's say the criminals on the left hand of the IQ bell curve have been filtered out, and we're left with a more competent group of criminals at the moment. And we see this mainly in the realm of hacks. Now, hacks are the foremost form of cryptocurrency crime in 2022. If you follow Web3, crypto, DeFi news at all, you will see that it feels almost daily. There are stories of a new DeFi protocol, a new project that's been hacked for hundreds of millions of dollars. So what do hacks mean in crypto? Well, historically what it's meant is that criminals would hack a centralized exchange. So think of a Coinbase, a Binance, a KuCoin. They are sitting on a huge amount of cryptocurrency that they use as liquidity. Now, as a centralized exchange, they hold the private key, the password, so to speak, to this cryptocurrency. So what these criminals actors will do is they will try to find a way to access that private key. One way that they will do that is they will try and do phishing attacks. They will try and scam individuals at the exchange to gain access to their files to get the private key and then move the funds out. But now, nearly all hacks have occurred on DeFi platforms, nearly 100%. Look at this right here. Why are they targeting DeFi protocols? Well, due to the nature of DeFi, everything is public. Their code is public as well. So that means if there is a vulnerability in the code, what this then means is that they can exploit it. They can siphon the funds out. Now, a lot of firms, what they are doing now is they are doing code audits where they have a third party review their code to make sure it's clean, but those aren't entirely foolproof. And we can see that 95% of hacks in 22 have been on DeFi. And that points to that sophistication. These criminals are pretty smart. And we can see that by the fact that 60% of those hacks have been from North Korea. So it's actually groups affiliated with the North Korean government that are conducting these hacks and using these funds for their nuclear weapons programs. So like I said, they are getting smart, but the good news is that we at Chainalysis, we're actually getting smarter. And we've launched our own product right now that's specifically designed for Web3 businesses. It's investigations for the era Web3 to let criminals know that there is, again, still nowhere they are less safe than on the blockchain. And to discuss this in more detail and give you a quick demo, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Shai.
Thanks, Diederik, for that amazing insight. I think that was really helpful and insightful for the audience. Building on what Diederik said, right, about the hacks. I mean, you know, coming from a cybersecurity background, it's always easy to fix a technology problem, right? But when it comes to actual cybercrime, cybersecurity issues, does anybody know what's the weakest link? I think the lady in the second row said humans. So absolutely. So I mean, it's very easy to social engineer and, you know, get your passwords or get your private keys and stuff like that. And I imagine some of you raise your hands who owns an NFT. So who has actually been hacked or gotten his NFT lost? I know you have been wash-traded once. But that's one of the, let's say, one of the very common cases, right, where people actually lose their private keys, they lose their accounts, and they end up like losing their funds and their NFTs and stuff like that. So a quick show of hands, how many of you have actually used a public block explorer? Okay, amazing. And how many of you have ever tried to follow an NFT transfer going through different smart contracts or different addresses? Okay, I see a couple of hands and some smiles in the crowd as well, so which is pretty amazing. So this example that I'm going to talk about is basically around a hack which has happened, and an NFT was stolen from a private wallet, right? So this is a well-known public blockchain explorer called Etherscan, right? This is what you actually see when you log into it and you are looking for a transaction hash. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, right? So this is a transaction hash, and I can see, yeah, it was World of Women NFT, which was transferred from one account to the second account, and that's pretty much it, right? Now, if I want to follow this NFT and see where the hacker or the attacker actually went and off-ramped this NFT, I need to have a big whiteboard or an Excel sheet and lots of note-taking and stuff like that, right? To solve that problem, we have launched Storyline, which is officially going to be GA next month, right? So this is what it looks like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly take that transaction hash, which is over here, and put that in our Storyline. So I'm not sure if you have seen any other tools from Chainalysis, but we do have other technologies which focus around investigating and analyzing and understanding the flow of funds, right? But traditionally, the problem has been if you want to see a temporal flow of where the transactions are happening, it's always a little challenging from that perspective, right? So this Storyline enables you to build a story so you can see where the funds are moving, if some exchange has been hacked, where the money is flowing, and where it goes off ramp, right? So once I put the transaction hash in, let me zoom that in a little bit so it's better. You can automatically see that it's an NFT transfer on the Ethereum blockchain, right? And what I can do is I can quickly just add this transaction on the Storyline. Now, this is quite interesting and simple as well. We can see two addresses, right? So and the minus signs essentially show us who lost the asset and who gained the asset, right? So we can see this address 3C23 lost the NFT, right? And it says NFT transfer because the blockchain doesn't know it's actually a hack. It just knows that NFT was transferred from address A to address B. It's us who are investigating this, and we understand that it's a hack, right? So what we can do is we can essentially, just to ease out our graph, I can say this is the victim, and I can say this is the suspect, right? And what Storyline does is it allows you to follow this NFT or this asset or this token or this money, right, very easily. Now what I can do is I can see this guy got a plus, so that means it actually gained that NFT, right? So I can simply click on this, and I can see I want to see the next 5 outgoing transactions for this NFT, right? So if I hit this, what Storyline is going to do is it's going to show me that there was an NFT sale purchase. So it quickly shows us that once the NFT was transferred from the victim to the suspect, he just went off and sold it off, right? So I can just add this transaction. And if you focus on time, it says at 11:57 this NFT was stolen, and at 12:06 it was just sold off, right? Now it doesn't look very let's say fancy or very descriptive. That's because we have hidden the additional details, right? So we can see this guy lost or sold the NFT and gained some wrapped ETH, right? So I can click on this and I can see the additional details about the transaction. So I can add some more details on this, right? What this means is he went to OpenSea. Everybody is aware about OpenSea, yeah? And he sold it to someone, right? It could be his friend or just randomly he went and sold it, right? So we don't want to track this because now somebody wasn't really aware that it's a stolen NFT, so we don't want to catch that guy, right? So we want to focus on our suspect. So we want to see where did he actually went off-ramp and gain some money out of it. So I'm just going to go and just hide these because I don't want to prosecute, a normal guy. So what I can do is I can then follow this wrapped ETH, like what happened with this wrapped ETH. So simply click on this and just try to trace the next 5 transactions, right? So then what this does is basically I can see a couple of other things. So from this address, he has done some swap on some aggregators, and then he had more NFTs which he wanted to sell off, right? So if I want, I can actually go in and see what other NFTs did this guy manage to steal, right? Or I can just see where he's trying to off-ramp his money. So let me add this to my Storyline. So as you can see, on 12/12, he swapped some wrapped ETH for some DAI, right? And if we want, we can see which exchange or which DeFi it went to. So we can see it went to Uniswap and using his MetaMask, right? So we can see all the transaction details. So of course, we won't get any details from Uniswap because, as Diederik mentioned, it's DeFi, it's not regulated, right? There's no KYC involved. So I still want to see where he goes to get the money so he can buy a nice car or a nice yacht or whatever, right? So essentially what we can do is we can then track this money going forward or this crypto going forward. And once we do that, let's wait for it. It says token transfer on the Ethereum chain. So let me add this. And then we can see he kind of moved it to another address, right? So even if I chase one set of tokens, I can kind of see if it's moving forward. So essentially, we can assume right now that the second address also belongs to the hacker or the attacker, right? Because he's not directly trying to go to the exchange, because even exchanges have some regulations in place where they can see if this money is directly coming from, let's say, an illicit activity or not, right? So then we can follow this 14,000 DAI. So we can essentially see, he's gaining a lot of DAI from different places. There's 3,000 DAIs and there's 14,000 DAIs. And then if we move forward from here, we can essentially track these funds, and there's a lot of different transfers happening. We can kind of add a few of these transactions. And given the fact that we do attributions on chain, right? So what that means is we understand and we know who are the entities or the services behind those addresses, right? So if you're looking on a public block explorer, you will see a token transfer from this address 0B100 to some other address. But since we have the attributions, we understand that this address now belongs to hit BTC, right? And that's where this guy is trying to go off ramp. Now, if you're an investigator or if you're a forensic specialist and you're just chasing this stolen NFT, that's how you essentially go and knock on the doors of those exchanges to then ask that, guys, can you please give us details about this transfer, so you can get your NFT, beloved NFTs back, right? This is a very, very simple use case, right? But if you want to go a little bit more complex, Storyline allows you to do that, right? So if I want to step it up a little, there can always be different bridges involved where you can swap your currencies, where you can try to kind of go through, by try to find your way through by just hiding your tracks. But this is an example for cross-chain deposit, which allows you to move your money between different currencies, so you can kind of track that as well. And has anybody heard about the Harmony Bridge hack, which happened, right? So this is actually the real storyline for how the Harmony Bridge hack happened, and where the money was going, right? So I'm not going to go into the details of this, but it's actually pretty elaborate and interesting storyline to look at. And then we also outline if the money was sent to a mixer and some OFAX SDN transaction, stuff like that. So with that, basically, we understand that once you have an NFT, when you have a transaction ID or whatever, you can obviously use the public block explorer. But with Storyline, it simplifies those investigations, right? And not just basic simple investigations. The complexity can be anything, depending on the use case and depending on what you want to transact. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, I'll pass it back to Diederik.
Well, I'll just leave us with the thank you for that, Shai. I'll just leave us with the closing thoughts that as good as it's to see that we have all these tools for fighting the criminal activity in a blockchain, I do want to bring you back to that 0.15% figure and remind you of the fact that yes, there are bad actors in this space, and yes, we do need to be able to fight against them. But the vast majority of actors in Web3 are completely legitimate, and this does represent a very unique opportunity in history to really change the course of finance and the internet as we know it. And we at Chainalysis, we want to work with businesses like a lot of you here in the room today to help make that happen. So I thank you all very much for your time. I hope this was informative. We're on the booth right over there as well, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you both of you. We still have a bit of time for questions. Yes, that gentleman over there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. Just wondering what your view is on privacy in general on the blockchain. Do you see privacy as a good thing, as a bad thing that you want to fight with your solutions? Or because the first association for me when I thought of Chainalysis, right, before I came to this talk now, I thought, okay, this is one of these things that's going in the direction of institutionalizing crypto, more government control of crypto, kind of against the original ethos of preserving privacy for the user. I'm just wondering if you have any stance on that or any thoughts on that?
Well, thank you very much for your question. The first thing I'll say to Chainalysis, we don't take any data on individuals. So we're purely attributing addresses to services. You're not going to find any private people in there. You're not going to see anybody's name in there. What we do is we will identify, let's say, darknet marketplaces, criminal addresses that have been associated with criminal activity. And what we see this as doing is creating a more fair and safe blockchain. People aren't going to want to use crypto. People aren't going to want to be on the blockchain if a scammer can take all their money and there's no means by which they can be found again. people aren't, businesses, exchanges aren't going to want to operate in this space if they might be aiding and abetting criminals and terrorists and they have no idea. If you actually look at the data, and I don't have it in front of me, but there was far more criminal activity on the blockchain in the early days of crypto. If you look at, let's say, the early days of Silk Road, Mt. Gox, BTCE, and it was like that because there weren't solutions like this in place to help counteract it. And that really led to crypto getting the terrible reputation it's still trying to shake off a little bit. So what I see us doing is helping to legitimize crypto, letting people know that this is a fantastic opportunity and there are tremendous benefits to having a public blockchain, but also making people feel more safe and secure. And I don't believe that this industry can go forward without businesses like Chainalysis ensuring that there is safety on the blockchain for both the users and the businesses operating.
Okay, thank you. But just, you think the industry can grow without any privacy for individual users, especially in DeFi? Because once your address is associated with some KYC service, or once somebody has your data, people know you got this money from your job, for example, in a Web3 company or something. And now I can track everything to the blockchain anywhere you go, right? So is there any way out to solve this dilemma, to still have privacy, but to also have legitimacy?
Yeah, I understand your concern. I'm not sure if I have exactly an easy answer for it. I will say that, again, we don't take any private person's data. You're not going to find your name on there. And yeah, I'd rather speak to you a little bit afterwards. I need to formulate my thoughts on this a little bit. But yeah, I will just reiterate the point that we really only look at the services. We really only look at the criminal entities, and that if you yourself are operating on the blockchain, you're not going to find your own name anywhere in our database.
Thank you.
I have two quick questions. One very simple question. You focused on the ETH ecosystem. Are you on any other public chains as well, like the Cosmos ecosystem and so on?
Yeah, so if I come back here and click on new story. So these are all the chains we support for now, right? So BNB, Polygon, Phantom, Avalanche, etc., etc. And as we develop, we are going to definitely be covering a lot more blockchains. So this example was just on Ethereum, but we do have coverage across other blockchains.
Do you have a public roadmap or anything we can look at?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Do you have a roadmap or anywhere that we can look at to see what support's coming on and possibly when?
So this tool is going to be GA next month on the 19th. So I'm assuming with that we'll have some sort of public roadmap that we can definitely share with you. I mean, if you need more information, we're just behind the MetaMask booth,
good.
so we'll be happy to assist you on that.
All right,
Thank you.
great. My second question is more broader. So you focus mostly on the use case for safety and compliance, avoiding cybercrime. But I'm wondering if the tool's already out or if it has had pilots, have you seen any cases from the user end, especially in countries where crypto law makes it hard for the regular person to access it? And they might also want to be on the right side of the law. Have you seen any use cases? I'm just curious.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Use cases for an individual user that might want to use
Correct.
this?
Instead of a government agency or a crypto project.
Yeah, as a business, we almost exclusively work with other businesses. Generally speaking, this isn't something that we would sell to private individuals, and they usually don't have an appropriate use case for it. So primarily work, like I said, crypto businesses and financial institutions for compliance, law enforcement and governments for investigations. Sorry.
Are there, you haven't come across any cases where the financial institutions would want to use this as an interface for the end user?
So just to understand the question, what you're saying is if the financial institution would want to expose this, let's say, platform to the end user so they can kind of figure out what's happening?
Some functionality of that kind.
I mean, to be honest, there's two parts to this question, right? One is the traditional financial institutions are not matured enough yet to actually have access to this, right? With no disrespect. And then the second thing is, I mean, it would be up to their discretion if they want to provide this information. So we do deal with a lot of financial institutions, but from a different perspective, plus exchanges. So they can provide some sort of reports and some sort of intel to their customers that, that they need to maintain certain sort of compliance and where the funds are coming from. But again, it's not from our perspective, it's from their perspective, because up to them how much data they want to share with the customers.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Hello, thank you everybody for joining us. This block stage is expecting the next speaker, who is from Edverse, who's talking about education in the metaverse. However, we are yet to find the speaker. He's here. He's here. Okay, so he's preparing right now. So a little bit about myself. My name is Hayate from Cointelegraph Japan. I'm here today to moderate this panel, this great stage, block stage, discussing a lot about the metaverse, Web3, and now, like you told, the previous speaker, about security. And I'm from Japan, and Japan has a lot of games. Japan is building a lot of metaverses as well. We are good? Yeah, we are seeing a lot of projects popping up in Japan as well. They have a lot of booths here as well. We are supporting them to enter the global market. And one of them is called Genso, but should I keep talking? Yeah. Yes. Yes, okay. All right, so one of the most exciting projects I'm seeing right now in Japan is that all these big gaming companies that you may have heard of, for example, Sega, Square Enix, of course Sony, PlayStation, they're of course transitioning into Web3. And you'll see a booth over there. They are a Nintendo Switch PlayStation 4 game that was the most downloaded game in 2018. They're transitioning into a Web3 metaverse. They're called Genso. And they already have an existing Web2 user base who are very keen on, of course, moving into Web3. So I think that these Web2 games that are transitioning into Web3 are going to bring with them a lot of non-crypto users, and we're going to see more and more Web3 adoption. One big Web3 app that was released over in the world, of course, you may know, is called Steppen. Steppen was a smash hit in Japan. It was crazy because, of course, I was in crypto for 6-7 years now, but my friends who had never talked a single second about crypto were starting to download Steppen, the app, and they were walking to earn. And I think this year was a very big year for mass adoption, and I think you'll see a lot coming from Japan, Asia, and of course Southeast Asia as well. I think you know that the Philippines is the highest adoption rate for MetaMask, and Indonesia as well. And I myself, we're going to have a panel tomorrow at TD5 stage as well, talking about how to tap into the Japanese market. The Japanese market is, of course, the third largest economy, and still we have the highest user rate of Twitter, highest user rate of people actually paying for paid content on gaming as well. So, of course, Web3 apps will be important in Japan as well, I think. It would be great if I could show you some slides, but since I'm just speaking,